I was born and I grew up in a very rural and conservative village of Bendel in Kuruman, the Northern Cape of South Africa. And I used to see how women were struggling to be involved in leadership roles or at the forefront of some of the important community meetings, such as the Lekgotla, which is a typical village gathering chaired by the chief. In fact, at most Lekgotla, most minority people were not allowed to speak, or the voices were significantly ignored. And I'm not even talking about anything complicated here. I mean, this is a village where there was no running water, no electricity, no proper roads, cows and goats as part of the community, and you have to travel 50 kilometers to town, squashed at the back of a buggy with no air conditioner. I'm yet to witness a local female chief in my village, something that has always bothered me. This struggle, however, for leadership roles was only by a few, only those women who were brave enough to challenge the status quo, as it was just taboo for women to get themselves involved in such activities then. And so my curiosity on this odd-looking phenomenon began in my early days when I was just a little girl. It simply didn't make sense to me, and it still doesn't. My personal real-hand exposure to this very challenge was at the end of high school, when I declared that I'm going to study engineering, and my own father asked, Thato, how do you think you're going to do that when so many boys have returned from university without having completed this very manly qualification? As a girl, who was I to think that I could do it? Well, through my mother's support and my relentlessness, I did it anyway, and I completed my qualification in industrial engineering record time. I suppose much to my father's surprise. I'm going to cover 3 areas in my talk. I will first look at the current realities of corporate in South Africa. Then I will briefly explore some of the new thinking around leadership in the world. And lastly, I will pull together an agenda, yes, very briefly so, an agenda for African women leaders. Let me just paint a picture of reality of the corporate world in South Africa. In my current research study, I'm exploring on how coaching as a tool can amplify the authenticity of female leaders. Part of this is understanding challenges and barriers that they face that hinder them to embrace their authenticity. I've interviewed female leaders from many corporate organizations across different industries. When I asked these women to share their leadership journey experiences with me, many of them highlighted challenges that make it really challenging for them to always show up authentically as female leaders, being the minority. In my study, I have discovered the following as prevalent in the corporate organizations, our sad reality. Women's competence is continually being challenged. We constantly have to prove our worth. We have to go against our authentic selves from the expectations to fit in. But even so, when we do, and we blend our natural warmness with toughness, and when we do learn and exercise this toughness, then we are aggressive and irrational. And if we dare remain to our natural authenticity and sensitivity to emotions, then we are soft and too weak. Research refers to this as a double-band dilemma. We often get overlooked for promotions and rarely get trusted with critical responsibilities and key decisions. In fact, some of my research participants frankly say that they're being patronized. So let us be real here for a moment. When a person is denied the opportunity and the freedom to act in a way that is coherent with what they truly are, they literally get limited in giving their best. Their creative thinking is stifled and they're limited in their way and their ability to influence. You can't exactly expect me to be a woman at home and then get to the office and become somebody else. I am one individual, irrespective of where I am and what role I play. And so, for me, it is vitally important that my whole self is accepted and respected. My gentle self, my sensitive self, my nurturing self, and my intuitive self. Now I'm going to look at some of the new thinking around leadership in the world and the move towards authentic leadership. There's an increasing focus on leadership in the world, and the world is generally rethinking ideas about leadership as we find ourselves in a world that challenges are more complex. Globally, there's a new creative way of thinking, and more people are moving towards authentic leadership. But do we, as leaders, create conducive environments for this creative thinking? I believe that there's a dire need for authentic leaders, for leaders to act more humane. Authentic leaders are described as having deep self-awareness and always exerting behaviors that is aligned with their core values. They're often guided by the internal moral compass and high ethical standards. Today, my focus is more on female leaders. Research shows that the inclusion of larger numbers of women leaders correlates with improved corporate performance. And so, that means that then the valuable contributions that women leaders make is undeniably significant. And this statement is supported by strong research base. There's a need for us as women to embrace our unique feminine values despite the external forces against us. Let me provide context to the feminine values that I speak about. When I talk about these, I'm referring to the innate attributes, qualities, and strengths that women are born with. I refer to qualities such as being sensitive, compassionate, empathetic, and nurturing. It is true indeed that women naturally embody these attributes. Women recognize that we, as human beings, do have emotions, and how people express these emotions is always situational. We therefore need to be sensitive to all these emotions and practice more understanding and be more patient with one another. Women naturally enable, empower, and groom. How therefore women approach problems certainly brings an alternative to the table. From a South African perspective, however, there are some social and cultural factors that need to be taken into consideration when we're talking about embracing authenticity. I want to emphasize that I bring this up with the aim of deconstructing some of the traditional hierarchies and the effects of the patriarchal effects of power, systems of power on women. These social issues go way back to early childhood, when young children are being taught and socialized with ideas of gender roles. I'm also aware of some of the rigid cultural beliefs that create false dichotomies in the different leadership roles that women can successfully fulfill. Indeed, I'm also aware of some gender stereotypes that creates another layer of complexity to embracing authenticity. And these are the barriers that we ought to challenge and break. I see authenticity as a coherence between one's inner value framework and its manifestation towards outer behavior. When this coherence exists and it is witnessed by others, it generates such an attractive power with greater significance and influence. Drawing on the reality of corporate and this new thinking around leadership, I want to boldly put an agenda for female leaders in Africa. With the reality of the fourth industrial revolution, digital technology, robots, artificial intelligence, authenticity has become more essential. Respect, relationships, and the Ubuntu spirit, which talks about common humanity, our African core values. To preserve these core values, we need to reconnect with our true selves, the African way. I ask that we care more for each other, that we help each other more, that we support one another, empower and uplift one another, and that we work together towards growing and developing our nation and our continent. But how do we achieve this? You could ask yourself. How do we adjust to this digital world and still preserve our Africanism and authenticity as females? I believe that we need to go back to the basics of what makes us human. We need to create a place where we can be freely vulnerable and authentic. For me, vulnerability is fundamental in forming key relationships and trusting relationships with each other and being sincere in doing so. I honestly don't think that you can be authentic without being vulnerable. Authentic females lead positive change. Authentic females lead authentically. They lead from the heart. They inspire. They are ethical and they transform. This is my core agenda for African women leaders. In closing, as we reflect on the current realities in corporate and the new thinking around leadership, I believe that we need to perpetually engage in deep and radical dialogues collectively as males and females. We need to have these dialogues with the aim of empowering a broader range of African women leaders to release and refine this leadership capacity and transform this capacity into concrete behaviors that fundamentally shape the right culture in the workplace and our communities. Through this, we can start shaping new narratives, the authentic African leadership stories. My dream is to, in my home village of Bendel, engage with a female chief. I dream of seeing female chiefs and leaders unifying together with the community to bring transformation in the village. I would really love to see my children visit a different village to the one I grew up in. And so my invitation to you is to invoke that little girl or little boy in you, is to constantly remind yourself of who you truly are and embrace your authenticity to serve and to influence positively. Thank you.